He's 3 meters from the top when the rock under his hand starts to move. Not crumbling, moving. A ripple, like the stone is breathing. Then he sees them, thousands of tiny bodies, flowing over the lip like liquid shadow, pouring down toward him in a coordinated wave. Not scattered, not panicked. Hunting. Because spider swarms don't just live in remote ecosystems, they defend them. And climbers? They're the perfect size. Subscribe right now, because at 9:47 you'll see what happens when a swarm decides you're not leaving the wall. Before we track what happened on that cliff, you need 3 pieces of context. Because this isn't about one spider, or even a nest. This is about coordinated group behavior that most climbers never see, until it's too late. Beat 1. In isolated ecosystems, remote cliffs, hidden valleys, untouched rock faces, spiders that are normally solitary start exhibiting pack behavior. They share territory, they share webs, they share kills, and when a threat enters their zone, they respond as one organism. Beat 2. Climbers trigger swarm responses more than any other animal. Why? Because climbers are slow, predictable, and trapped on vertical terrain. They can't run, they can't hide, they can only go up or drop. To a swarm, a climber looks like trapped prey on a web they didn't know they entered. Beat 3. Swarms don't attack randomly, they test first. A single scout, a few threads across your route, a sudden stillness in the air. If you react wrong, if you swat, if you panic, if you disturb their web structure, the swarm reads it as a threat. And you'll understand why the worst thing a climber can do is fight back. Let's rewind to earlier that morning. The climber we're tracking, we'll call him Alex, arrived at the base of a granite wall in a remote wilderness corridor. No trails, no chalk marks, no signs anyone had climbed it recently. That should have been the first warning. But climbers see untouched and think opportunity. Swarms see untouched and think protected. Alex started his approach through dense forest. The trail felt odd. No birds, no insects buzzing, just wind through branches and the crunch of his boots. Then he noticed the webbing. Not the thin, delicate kind you walk through by accident. Thick, structural, strung between trees at chest height like tripwires. He cut through the first one with his knife. It didn't snap like normal silk. It resisted, stretched, then tore with a sound like ripping fabric. He looked at the strand on his blade. It wasn't one thread. It was braided. Dozens of individual silk lines wound together. Spiders don't do that alone. They do it when they're building infrastructure. But wait, it gets worse. Because when he looked back at where he'd cut the web, something was already moving toward the break. Not one spider, a cluster. 6, maybe 8, moving in formation, inspecting the damage, touching the cut strands with their legs like they were reading a message. Alex told himself it was coincidence, but the cluster didn't scatter when he stepped closer. They held position, facing him, like sentries. He moved past them quickly, and they didn't follow. They just watched. He reached the cliff base and saw the first pale streaks on the rock. That's when the ecosystem told him the truth he didn't want to hear. This wall belongs to something that's been here longer than him. Alex clipped in and started up. The first 20 meters were clean, normal granite. A few chalk marks, old, faded, maybe years old. Then he hit the zone. The pale streaks he'd seen from below weren't chalk. They were silk deposits, layered, dried, covering sections of the wall like insulation. He touched one. It stuck to his glove. Not like a cobweb, like adhesive tape. And underneath the silk, the rock was polished smooth. That's not natural weathering. That's traffic. Heavy, repeated traffic. He kept climbing, trying to avoid the streaks, but the route funneled him toward them. Every good hold was near a silk patch. Every clean crack had webbing in the seams. That's when he felt it. A tug on his rope. Not from below, not from his harness, from above. He looked up. The rope, a section about 2 meters over his head, had a thin white thread wrapped around it. spiraled, deliberate, like something had been winding it while he climbed. But wait, here's the thing that made his stomach drop. The thread was tight, not loose, not drifting. It was under tension, like it was connected to something pulling on the other end. He yanked the rope. The thread didn't break. It pulled back. Alex made a choice. He could retreat, down climb to safety, or he could push through and finish fast. He chose speed, worst mistake, because speed is exactly what triggers a swarm. It reads rapid movement as prey running, and when prey runs on a web, the swarm doesn't wait to identify it. It floods the zone. Alex was 3 moves from the lip when the wall shifted. Not a rockfall, not wind, movement. He pressed his cheek to the stone and looked up. The entire underside of the overhang was covered, not with webbing, with bodies. A living sheet. Thousands of spiders packed so tightly they looked like a single shadow. And when he moved his hand toward the lip, the sheet rippled, like a muscle contracting. Then the edge began to break apart. Not chaotic, not panicked, organized. Dozens of spiders peeled off the mass and started moving down the wall, toward him, in tight formation. Here's what most people don't understand about coordinated spider swarms. They don't mob you like ants. They surround you in layers. First layer, scouts. Fast, light, mapping your position. Second layer, blockers. Cutting off escape routes with silk. Third layer, enforcers, the biters. Alex saw the scouts reach his left hand first. Tiny, maybe thumbnail-sized, moving in a line across the holds he'd planned to use next. They stopped, turned, and faced him. Not attacking, not retreating, blocking. He shifted right. A second line of scouts appeared on the right holds. Same behavior, facing him, holding position. The blockers arrived. Larger spiders, still small but bulkier, started laying silk across the cracks and edges. Not random web. Barrier lines. Thick strands stretched between holds, turning his route into a maze of tripwires. He tried to brush one away. It held. He pulled harder. The strand snapped, but 2 more instantly replaced it, laid by spiders moving in sync on either side. But wait. It gets worse. Because he felt the rope tighten, not from his harness, from above. Something was pulling the rope upward, toward the lip. He looked up and saw it. The swarm had anchored his rope to the overhang with silk. Not loosely, structurally. They were trying to lock him in place. Alex did something that proved how intelligent swarms really are. He went completely still, stopped moving, stopped breathing hard, froze, and the swarm paused. The scouts stopped advancing. The blockers stopped spinning. The enforcers, larger spiders now visible near the lip, held position. For 10 seconds, nothing moved. It was a test. The swarm was deciding, is this prey or a threat? Alex didn't know it, but in that moment, his life depended on not being interesting. He stayed frozen, and slowly, one by one, the scouts began retreating. Not running, not scattering, withdrawing in formation. The swarm had decided he wasn't worth the energy, but it didn't fully leave. It reset, pulling back to the lip, reforming the living sheet, waiting. Because the swarm doesn't abandon territory, it just waits for the next move. Alex had one chance. He couldn't go up. The lip was guarded. He couldn't stay. The swarm was still watching. So he did the only thing that makes sense when you're on a predator's web. He dropped, not a fall. A controlled descent, 2 meters down, fast, using the rope like a fireman's pole. The moment he moved, the swarm reacted, but not by chasing, by cutting. Spiders swarmed the rope anchor point and started severing the silk they'd laid. Not to trap him, to release him, because the swarm had recategorized him. He wasn't prey anymore. He was a retreating threat. And swarms don't waste energy chasing threats out of their territory. They just make sure the threat keeps going. Alex downclimbed fast, hands shaking, chalk gone, adrenaline doing the work. Every time he paused, he felt the air change, like the swarm was tracking him from above. He hit the ground. He didn't stop to coil his rope. He didn't check his gear. He ran. And when he hit the forest trail, he saw them again. The sentries. The same cluster that had inspected the web he'd cut that morning. They were back at the break point, watching him leave. Not following. Just confirming. Alex made it to his car. He threw his gear in the trunk and sat in the driver's seat, hands still trembling. And that's when he saw it. On his harness, on the rope bag, on his chalk bag strap. Tiny silk threads, not cobwebs, markers. The swarm had tagged him. So what did we just witness? Not a random spider attack. A coordinated territorial defense by a distributed intelligence that doesn't need a brain to make decisions. Here's what makes this terrifying. Spider swarms don't see you as food. They see you as a disruption. You're too big to eat, too dangerous to ignore, so they don't kill you. They remove you. And the way they do it, testing, surrounding, blocking, tagging, shows a level of tactical behavior we usually associate with pack hunters. Wolves, orcas, humans. But spiders? They're doing it with no communication, no leader, no plan, just reaction. Thousands of individuals, each responding to the spider next to them, creating a wave of collective action that looks like strategy. Here's the deeper truth. Climbers enter ecosystems we think are empty. We see a quiet wall and assume it's neutral ground. But ecosystems aren't empty. They're occupied. And in remote places, where predators are scarce, where competition is low, spiders stop fighting each other and start defending their zone, together. The swarm didn't fail. It succeeded. It pushed Alex out. And it marked him so that if he ever comes back, the system will recognize him faster. So here's what you do with this information. If you're a climber, or if you're heading into remote territory, watch for the signs. Silence. Structural webbing. Polished rock where there shouldn't be traffic. And if you see a pale streak on stone, don't touch it. Because you're not entering empty space. You're entering occupied territory. And the swarm is already watching.